Sometimes the blessings comes right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. But without a doubt, the more you become better at pausing, the more you could become greater at restriction, the more quickly and the more great your blessings will be.
Hello and welcome to Spiritually Hungry. Today we're talking about something many of us have heard, said, or didn't say but felt, and that is, I'm triggered. Now this is a word that triggers many people. It's something that's become very popular, and we don't want to make anybody's feelings feel unimportant, but we want to unpack what I'm triggered really means.
Weren't we doing restriction today?
What?
I prepared for the wrong podcast, apparently.
Wait,
or at
no.
least one of us did.
Well, no, I definitely did not. It leads to how to be proactive. We're going to get there.
Okay, restriction and proactive. Is that?
We're eventually getting there. But it was really about being triggered. All right, so we're going to keep going. So there are moments that something happens and our emotional reaction is immediate, intense, and somehow outsized. It feels personal and more intentional than the moment may warrant. A comment, a tone, being dismissed, being ignored, being criticized, seeing an injustice, and suddenly this thing rises inside of us and we are triggered. And again, we're not dismissing anybody's feelings, but we want to understand this more deeply. So the trigger seems like it's something external, but it's connecting to something internal, maybe a wound that we have, a fear, a memory, an insecurity, or an unmet need. And it's interesting. I was reading something that Dr. Becky Kennedy said. She was talking about how, and it's in the book, the body keeps the score. There are certain memories we have, even from our childhood, our first experiences, where let's say we were yelled at or reprimanded, and we can't necessarily even access those experiences or those memories, but our body can. And then later, when we start to react, we show up in that way for other people because we're trying to protect ourselves. It's our experience we had. Let's say we did something, we were yelled at. Then when our child does something, we yell at them, and we're trying to protect them in a sense, but it's also what we learned. So this triggering thing, which we're going to unpack and eventually lead to, you may laugh, eventually lead to kabbalistic tools, I think is such an important idea to discuss, because when we know the things, again, sometimes, and we understand from a spiritual perspective, but if we look at the very first early experience, a lot of the things that we react to they almost seem involuntary.
Well, I think that it's not coincidental that after the last few podcasts where we spoke about tikkun, we're now talking about being triggered and hopefully the spiritual view of it. And I think it's really important to accept that, as you said, while we don't diminish neither what triggers us or our internal reaction to it, I think if the view, and this is the spiritual view, that everything has a spiritual purpose, then the right way to react is not to say, well, this is who I am, right? And there are people who do this, which I don't think in the long term really helps anybody. But this is who I am. You have to accept me, and therefore don't trigger me in these ways, right? The Kabbalistic view, the spiritual view would be, well, my correction is, how do I get over, or how do I, more importantly, grow from those things that trigger me? So it is important to know what they are, to learn about them, to learn about ourselves, but with the purpose and desire to actually grow from them rather than stay in them and have everybody else, protect us because of who we are.
Correct. I mean, I think the problem, and why we want to talk about this, is that when most people say, I feel triggered, it's kind of like, okay, so, don't talk to me about this, or don't get in my face, or I'm triggered by your behavior. And that's not really at all conducive. And there's no change or growth that happens from there. In fact, people are meant to feel shame or they're blamed. And that's just a dead end to any spiritual growth. But first I want to, and again, as you're saying, Kabbalah explains that intense reaction, which most people call trigger, is as reactivity. And we have a formula for that and how to be able to navigate that. But I just want to discuss what trigger looks like a little bit more. And basically, I think what it's doing is it's really revealing parts of ourselves that we haven't healed yet. The reason, and that's the example I gave at the beginning, those childhood experiences, there's things that sometimes we can't even access, right? It's that first experience where we're like, oh, I better not say what I want to loudly because that's a threat. My parents might not take care of me anymore. And of course, none of this is logical. That's why it happens so early on in life. And then from there, later, you might find a relationship that makes you feel that way, but you're not even understanding why you're being triggered. And I read this quote recently. It says, whatever triggers you controls you. So I think it's a really good place to start just for our listeners. What are the things that trigger you the most? And try to look back and say, okay, and I did this exercise and I'll share mine a little bit later, but it was really eye-opening. I've kind of understood it, but I see it in a whole different way now. But before we get there, let's talk about what being triggered looks like. And this is a story, an experience actually that happened when Abigail was 7, so about 6 years ago. And we went to meet my friend at a restaurant, and we went for a very long walk. We were in Connecticut and it was still Shabbat, so we had to walk. And I think I underestimated how far the walk was. We had no water. And by the time we got to this restaurant, we were starving and we were thirsty. I was a little irritable. We get to the restaurant. My friend's already there. She got to drive. And it was just overpacked, overcrowded, understaffed. It became so apparent. The tables were so close together. And I was just like, oh my God, if we stay here, we're going to wait like 2 hours to eat. So we decided not to sit down. We leave the restaurant. There's like a whole street filled with restaurants. We picked one that had outdoor seating. It was a nice summer night. So we go, we sit down, we ordered something to drink, and I feel an energy at me. And I look up and I notice that there's a man who like got very excited when he saw my face. Like, oh, I found the person I was looking for. And I realized that he was at that first restaurant at the table next to us where we were going to sit, but didn't. So he comes over. He says, oh, I found you. And clearly he was triggered. And he said, I, in all of my life, have never experienced something so rude. It was unconscionable. And I'm thinking, well, you must not get out very much.
Well, because
how dare we go into a restaurant and decide not to sit down and walk out? Which, by the way, we told...
Was he the owner or was just a guest?
No, he was eating at the table next to us with his wife. And he actually went on to say that we ruined his dinner with his wife, which, I mean, we didn't even have an exchange. We were in the same vicinity and had a shared space for all of 2 minutes. And he was not part of any conversation that we were having. And he just wouldn't stop. I mean, he was very irate. No, I was with my best friend and with Abigail. And then I can see Abigail is getting very nervous. And I'm saying, wait, I'll come talk to you, right? Because he was really, and I knew that I couldn't just shush him away. I said, you're scaring my daughter. He said, I don't care. And he was making my friend very uncomfortable. We were all just like stunned. So I had a choice in that moment. I could either be reactive, but he wasn't really triggering me. I mean, of course, you know, my personality, I'm always like, what did I do? Could I have done something differently? And I almost went to that place of beating myself up, because that's what happens when people are triggered. You are left with a choice. Do I feel shame? Do I accept the blame? And then you can even look at the spiritual part. What am I learned? What am I meant to see here about myself? Or you say, okay, this just really isn't about me. Of course, spiritually, this had to happen on some whatever, but it was just so ridiculous. I didn't really care to unpack that even further. I just called him Mr. Grumpy in my head. And that was the experience. But that's what those
How did the conversation end? You went into a side to talk?
No, he wouldn't leave. He just kept, get up. I said, okay, thank you very much. But we're going to eat here now, and you're not eating at this restaurant. So, and then he walked away, and he walked away very happy because, that's usually what happens when people feel triggered and they vomit their stuff on you. They walk away kind of gloating, like I told them, which again is not obviously spiritual. There's no growth there. There's no change at all. But I think that it's an interesting, because I want to look at triggering or being triggered from all angles, from a person who is triggered and they put that on you, to then, does that trigger you and how do you react? So I remember it was, for me, just a teachable moment for Abigail, for myself also, that, you know, nobody should be the casualty of your own behavior. And you're not meant to make everybody happy. But more than that, when people are triggered in this way, like that was not even probably about me. That was something that, again, if we look back to childhood, that's probably in a way that he was raised, that you don't complain or that you shouldn't want more because it's not available to you. And a lot of people have a hard time with even expressing what they desire for that reason. So sometimes triggers are obvious like that. People insult you, they betray you, they speak harshly, and others are subtle, and they happen this all the time. Being interrupted, being excluded, not being thanked, seeing somebody else's success, your child ignoring you, a parent's criticism. So when we're triggered, there's a few things we can do. We can either feel attacked and we become defensive or angry. We withdraw, which we shut down or give the silent treatment. We please, meaning we over-explain and we appease, or we control. We micromanage everything. And each reaction that we have is just for us to feel safe. So that's, I think, all the ways that in the 1% reality, without a spiritual lens, that's how most people try to understand the trigger, try to avoid it, try to navigate it. But what we want to talk about is the kabbalistic view of reactivity, which is so inspiring and exciting. I want to start with this idea that Rabbi Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist, taught. He said, when a person becomes angry, the holy soul departs completely and a spirit from the realm of impurity enters in its place. So let's talk about that for a second, because the Zohar, which is the main Kabbalistic text of Kabbalah, has a lot to say about anger and what happens to a person and what happens to their energy and what they draw. Even the walls feel that, right?
Right. So I think we begin with the understanding that whenever we're being reactive, we are disconnecting from the light. And
within ourselves and what we can access.
Right. And to really, I think it's always important to understand the foundational teaching. And this goes back to the writings of the Ari of Isaac Luria. And he explains the process by which light is revealed. So there's two ways for light to be revealed. And when we say light, we mean right, that manifests as anything. It could be money, it could be joy, it could be anything. So the light flows from the supernal source, the endless, and it comes towards the individual. The way the spiritual system is set up, if the individual stops the light and says, I want to think about really, I want to have consciousness about how I am receiving this, that's called restriction. Or in the ancient words of Rabbi Isaac Luria, it's called a masach, you put up a barrier before reaction or even before receiving. And then that barrier, called restriction, then allows the light to be received by you, we call it in Kabbalistic terms, the vessel, in a way that can be lasting, in a way that can be fulfilling. Conversely, the other way to receive is light comes down from above, and there's no restriction. You just take it all in. That type of light received in that way, because it did not go through the proper process of light revealed, restriction, and then manifestation, but rather went straight from revelation to manifestation, then therefore it can be received, but it can only be momentary. It can only be transient. That light cannot and will not stay.
So let's give an example. So you're saying light being received and then restriction and then actualized. Right.
So my father example would always use the example of the bulb, where we call it the 3-column system. There's right column, which is the sharing. There's left column, which is the receiving. In between, you have to have the filament. You have to have a restricting moment or a restrictive action. And that is actually what allows the light or the receiving to occur in its greatest form, right?
But not all moments require restriction.
All important moments require restriction. Meaning, for instance, even good things, right? You're talking about being triggered in a negative way. A person, just is about to receive a lot of money, for example, or even is about to find their soulmate. If that process is not influenced by restriction, but rather just in what we call the desire to receive for the self alone, just give me, then whatever is being received, even if it's a great blessing, will lose of its value, will lose of its light, will lose of its fulfillment.
So what would restriction in those two examples look like?
So
drawing instance, the soulmate and a large sum of money coming your way. A person might just made a lot of money, right? In that moment, the consciousness should be 1 second. I don't want to just take this all in for myself, right? We call it charity, or we call it tithing. You say, a certain percentage of this, I'm going to stop my sense of I'm going to take all this in. No, I'll take 10%, or whatever that number is for the individual,
and I'm going to share it with somebody who needs, or somewhere that needs. That action of restriction, which falls in line with what we call the 3-column system: sharing, receiving, and restriction. Sharing, restriction, and receiving allows that money to now be much more powerful, much more fulfilling than it otherwise would have been. So it's interesting. There are actually studies on this, and this is a little bit of a tangent. Maybe we should have a whole podcast on the importance of charity or sharing. But that people who share, and this is actually scientifically proven through studies, that people who give charity or tithe, they make more money over the long run than people who don't.
We should plaster that.
Yeah. And there's a spiritual reason for that, because the sharing and receiving, or what we call receiving for the self alone without any restriction, does not allow for that circuitry of blessing, for that circuitry of light. A person is about to
the soulmate example,
right? Is going to marry their soulmate. If the consciousness with which they go into it is, oh, what is this person going to do for me? Right? What is it going to do for me? Just me, right? Which receiving, then, and not injecting restriction. And therefore, again, this is a whole other conversation about, when you start dating, should you, for example, should you restrict on the physicality of it, sex, all that. But the overarching secret is that if you want anything to be lasting, inject restriction in, and everybody can decide on their own what that
level
means
and
for
what
that
looks like, right?
But you will find, and this is both scientifically proven, but certainly for thousands of years, the Kabbalists have taught this, that the only things that last and the only things that wind up being true are those things that are injected with restriction. So, right, and that's always true. That's when you're receiving good things, or when things that trigger you, things that you don't think are that great are happening to
Even you. Mr. Grumpy, right? If I had reacted in a different way rather than restricted in that moment, right? I could have done a lot of different things, because he was really, really in my face. And actually he was so loud, other people in the restaurant started looking at our table, right? That would, whether it was my movie or not, or my story or not, and he was triggered, my response mattered so much in that moment. It was everything.
And this is an important point. So Kabbalistically, in this case, in your case, him coming to you was energy. Now, in reality, that is energy that you can take in and manifest it as a blessing in the next moment, in the next day, right? If you react to him, then you're really not creating the ability to receive that energy that is coming to you.
Or to transform it to a positive.
Well, it actually is positive if you receive it in the proper way. Right. That's the whole point. The point is, when somebody's coming towards you and to yell at you, for example, or to say something, there's actually great energy in that. And if you're able to restrict,
because it's diminishing it has the potential to diminish the ego.
Right. And it has an energy. It is an energy. And when you restrict in that moment, you're actually able to then receive that energy. And for you, it's a blessing. And that's why, for instance, I've mentioned this, but one of my, there's an ancient teaching that is inscribed upon my father's teacher at Brandwein's grave, that one of his qualities was shomim cherpatam be'inam meshivim, which means that he would hear people say terrible things about him, and he would not react or answer. Mehane'elavim ve'inan olvim, which means he would be embarrassed by other people and would never embarrass back. And it says that people like that, people who experience the trigger but do not react, a matter of fact, even better if you're able to embrace it, they are the ones who truly receive the greatest blessings, the greatest light. Their soul has the greatest amount of development. And I think that's
one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah. But I think the point is to understand that every moment of being triggered is actually a moment pregnant with great light and blessings for you. And whether you react or restrict is what affects whether you actually receive that great light or whether you're pushing it away.
Well, in the Zohar, it also says where there's, because this is an aspect of humility, one would say, right?
Well, you can call it, yes, humility is one side of it. I would say the other side of it is just being greedy. I want that light, right? So that guy coming up to you, if your view is he's coming here, this some great light, and I want that light. Yeah, I might be humble too. I have you can't have a huge ego and not be reactive. That's true. But the greatest thought about that moment is I want to be greedy for this blessing. And greedy in a positive way, of course. And therefore, I'm not going to react. I'm going to restrict so that I can receive that light, that blessing.
Right. And then nothing negative can dwell there.
Not only nothing negative, you actually receive
positive.
great light.
That's very powerful. I want to give an exercise to our listeners now.
Can I share something before that? I think it's maybe it will inspire.
Of course.
So I always love when the ancient spiritual teachings find their way into either modern day science, psychology, and this idea of restriction, although the Kabbalists have been teaching it for thousands of years, is very much spoken about in the world of psychology. And I want to quote here from Rollo May, is a very famous psychologist. In 1975, he wrote a book called The Courage to Create. And he writes the following: human freedom involves our capacity to pause between stimulus and response. Mm-hmm. And in that pause, to choose the one response toward which we wish to throw our weight. The capacity to create ourselves based upon this freedom is inseparable from consciousness or self-awareness. And the idea is that
I love that.
That growth, freedom, greatness comes from acting upon that restriction. You know, my father created this concept, and we teach it now in our classes, right? Pause, what a pleasure, right? The idea that every time you want to react, the way towards greatest light is always by first pausing. And again, here, Rollo May shares the same idea that you cannot really be free, actually, because in life there's always two things happening. Things are happening to us, and our reaction to them. The only free will we have is in the space between the stimulus, or that which is happening, and our reaction to it. And that is where the greatest light comes from. That is where the greatest growth comes from. That's where the greatest happiness comes from. So really, if you want to be a spiritual person, if you want to be a student of Kabbalah, you want to become the greatest pauser that you can be. And then choose the reaction, which is hopefully one influenced and directed by your desire for growth and change.
I love this so much. This is everything that we teach. This is really one of the main core principles of Kabbalah, especially at the Kabbalah Center. It's in our Kabbalah One course for good reason, because it's the hardest thing for people to do.
Consistently, right? You could do it every once in a while.
Yeah, and you think, oh yeah, I know that taxi driver or the guy driving slowly in front of me. You know, I get it. When to pause, what a pleasure, what a gift, what an opportunity. Yes, it's the harder, it's the more frequent triggers, the ones that feel personal, like the list that I made before, right? Where you feel like, oh, this person betrayed me, or my parent doesn't respect me, or whatever that looks like. And then that carries on through life.
But if I could say, sorry, is that the proper framing for that, right? The non-reactive framing for that is not, why is this person triggering me? Why is this person?
No, it's what am I meant to?
The knowledge right now, there's something amazing waiting for me. Let me discover how to extract that beautiful thing from the situation.
Yes, I love that you just took the words literally out of my mouth. So the tool that I was going to give is get curious, right? If you look at any situation, right, Mr. Grumpy, like I actually think about him still 6 years later, because I feel badly for him, quite honestly, that he felt so upset in the moment that he just wanted to vomit all over my dinner because he felt like I took something away from his, right? And that's a way most people go through life. And as I was thinking about this idea today, I was thinking, this was something that I had read earlier with Dr. Becky about childhood. Like I watched my home videos. My father passed 5 years ago, yesterday, actually. And right when he had passed, this is 5 years ago, I was watching home videos that I hadn't looked at for a long time. I mean, really a long time. And it was way too soon and too raw. After the third video, I was like, this is a really, really bad idea. And I haven't looked at it since. And I think for a project I'm working on next week, I'm actually going to look at the videos again. Anyway, I was with my best friend and we're watching this, and we both it took our breaths away, because she knows me well enough. I was like a prop, like at age 3 months, 1 year, the way I was handled, I literally it took my breath away. Why? Not because it was like what I saw was so jarring or abusive. It just, the way that I feel now in certain situations, if I'm handled or touched a certain way, or people I feel are are using me as a prop, I'm triggered, right? So I was able to connect that experience I have as an adult is not about any of these people coming and poking me, or if I feel slighted, and that it's a very specific way. It's not. It's what I saw in the video as a child when I don't have memory of that. And my parents loved me. I mean, like, I remember in one of the videos, I'm in my stroller and my father was like, he really was like a muscle man. He was like very manly. He would pick me up in the stroller and to give me a kiss and put it back down and up and down, up. And it was really like, I would never handle a small child like that, right? He wasn't doing it to be me. It was just, he was masculine. It was the 70s, you know, but that feeling I feel. So now that I understand that as an adult, I'm able to correct that. I'm able to accept, especially sometimes even the way that some of our kids would hug me, like very aggressively, like and it wasn't, my response was not normal. And I had always recognized it, but I couldn't figure out why. Now having this information, not everybody's necessarily going to get it, but I think if you're curious enough and you understand that what you're seeing today or what's triggering you today is not about this moment, then you can change that. So now I'm able to accept any kind of love, for example, with our children, right? Even if it's like aggressive, one of my daughters likes to like, you know, a bear hug or whatever, it's different because they understand the trigger. So there's 4 places that we can get curious about our origin story, right? So the first is look at a past trauma or an unhealed wound. And for me, again, that past trauma, it wasn't something I was aware of till I watched the videos and I was like, oh, now I understand why I have this visceral reaction in these situations. The second is unmet expectations. Let's say you expected loyalty or gratitude or fairness or recognition and you didn't get it. And maybe that incites feelings of unworthiness. When we get curious about why we're triggered and where it's coming from, it's much easier than to jump into the spiritual part of pause, what a pleasure. And of course, sometimes we're not going to understand it, but I think that these tools help bring this down to a very physical, we are in physical bodies in a way that's practical. The third is ego. That you need to be right, you need to be liked, you need to be respected, you need to be chosen, you need to be in control. And anything that threatens the ego can be a trigger. Again, another spiritual opportunity there. And the fourth is tikkun. And Kabbalah, we've talked about this on our podcast, talks about recurring patterns that are not random. The same problematic people, the same situations or emotions seem to rise again and again. And these are moments that are showing up to teach us something very, very, very specifically personalized for us to be able to change and to grow.
Yeah, I mean, maybe more simplistically, the way I would think about it and the way I try to think about it is when something happens that triggers us and we restrict.
This is so our personalities, by the way. I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. Let me look at it from every angle, the ego, psychology, the body. You're like, I'm going to be simple about this. Yes. What is your perspective?
And then you restrict, right? What does that allow space for? To ask the question, that which I want to react with, is it coming from my soul or is it coming from my ego? And I think one of the most important delineations that the study of Kabbalah, the study of spirituality, hopefully gives us is an ever-growing ability to differentiate the two. The ego has done its job to try to intertwine its desire and feeling into the individual, each one of us thinking, this is me, but it's not me. My ego's desire to react in one way, usually angry, usually negative, what I would say negative, usually selfish, is the external force. And the internal force of the soul is the one that wants to both first restrict and then think, where is my growth from this? By the way, that doesn't mean, as we've spoken about this in the past, that sometimes you do say certain things and do answer certain things, but it comes from a completely different place. And by the way, when you're coming from your soul and you feel that the right thing after restricting and assessing that the reaction needs to come from my soul
and speak,
it has much more light, much more power, will have a lasting effect.
And it's received usually differently as well. And your experience of it is different. I think the mistake many people make is they think their behavior, whether it's anger or sadness or whatever it is now their identity. And that's who they think they are. Really is another way of ego making us small. Soul, of course, is coming from the other place. But I think that, for instance, my example I gave about feeling like a prop, that is very much connected with my soul. I think for me, it was being able to say, I'm comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable with this, to be able to advocate for myself. It's one of my tikkuns in this lifetime. So I think that, of course, there's a spiritual bend to every single experience. And I think we should look to go back again, look at your unhealed wounds, because they're going to be, this is all tikkun, really. All of these follow under that. Your unmet expectations. Okay, well, where is that coming from? Is it ego or is it soul? Ego part, super clear. And then all of it's tikkun though. Yeah, I would just say that the biggest thing is get curious about, again, first restrict, obviously. But I worry that sometimes people confuse restriction with repression, which is not what we're saying at all.
Of course not. The one thing that I would add, which is important, is one of the great benefits of restriction is the fact that one reaction enables another reaction. There's a spiritual concept that says that if you do an action that's positive, it creates this effect that makes the next positive action much easier to do. Conversely, if you do this reactive action, it makes the next one easier, and the next one easier, and the next one easier, and you find yourself in this unending cycle of reactivity.
Where you give energy grows.
Exactly. So therefore, restriction is important not just for this moment, but it's also important 10 years from now. And this is a really important understanding of the importance of the spiritual work in the moment, is that we might, sometimes the process that we're going through is just to prepare us for a restriction that we'll need to do in 10 years from now. And if we don't proactively become great at restriction, at pausing, then there comes a time in life where we almost are helpless not to react.
Absolutely. So our tools for our triggers, first is pause the immediate reaction. So don't text immediately. Do not write that email. Do not say the first thing that comes into your head. Even if you wait 60 seconds, it changes your chemistry. With every breath, actually, you get calmer, and soul, ego are able to find space from one another. And if you're really, that's what we say kabbalistically, waiting 3 days is ultimately the best, because by that point, you don't feel any of those really strong negative emotions. And then the ones that still stay are the ones that are usually true and indicate what you should do next. The other thing I think is a very helpful tool is to name it specifically, not just say I'm triggered and leave it at that. Try, I feel rejected, or I feel disrespected, or I feel embarrassed. And then the thing after that is, okay, why do I feel these things? So to really unpack that, because when you say I'm triggered, okay, so I don't know, what are we talking about here? The third is separate past from present. Ask how much of what just happened is about this moment right now, and how much is it about things that have happened to me in the past. And the fourth is ask what's mine. Did they behave poorly, Mr. Grumpy? Maybe. Or is this a situation to tell me something about my thoughts, my actions that I could do differently or better?
Nice. And what I think for me is something that I would strongly recommend meditating upon is this idea that both blessings, growth, freedom, happiness are all an effect of how great we are at restriction, how great we are in that pause between the stimulus and the reaction.
It's funny because it reminds me of our oldest daughter, Miriam, yesterday told us a story. I mean, this is when I love New York City, because there's just like the craziest things happen here. And we all live in we're all packed here together. So she was walking down the street and she saw that a couple asked for some random person to take their picture with their phone. So he gets them into position and he's framing the phone to take the shot. And then he looks at them and he's like, bye. And he starts running off with their phone and like full speed. And then he stops. He's like, just joking. And I'm thinking like, that's super funny to do. And I consider for a second, like, would I ever do that? And I'd be like, no, I'd be afraid of a person's reaction, right? That's where this, like, it's a good visual kind of if we find the comedy in it, if we even just try to make light of what's happening when we feel like we should be most reactive. Like, for instance, what if that couple took him seriously and chased him, started to beat him up, and he didn't have the chance to say, haha, I was just joking, right? If we can give that space from when we feel triggered or reactive and just say, okay, well, what else could be happening here? And like even if that's not what's happening, right?
Well, it actually, I think it's very deep because in reality, I think that's always happening, right? So I'd like to take the opportunity to share a few. Obviously, it's interesting. Obviously, our episodes on Tikkun really influenced our listeners. We got a tremendous amount of emails from our listeners, and over the next few weeks, maybe we'll share. But I think I think it's always beautiful to see the divine hand that I think what we shared today very much dovetails into maybe answers or understandings for some of our listeners who shared with us. So I hope to share at least two of these emails, and I'd like to get, of course, Monica, your input on them. So hi there. I'm listening to your recent podcasts on Tikkun and absolutely know what mine is. However, I'm stuck on the best way to address it. Quotes, feeling as though I give so much to people, in parentheses, my direct reports in work, and certain ones just really try to challenge me or have a power struggle with me. I had this happen at a previous job, but it's happening again at another job, where my direct report seems to push back a lot, question my direction, think they know better than me, etc. I addressed it in my previous role by giving feedback, and that didn't go well. This time, I'm trying to kill her with kindness and directness. It still seems there's this underlying tension. Is the solve to address it head on? How do you know your tikkun isn't just in your head, your own personal perception? Warmly, Rachel. So the thought that came to mind as I was preparing for this podcast and also reading this email from Rachel is that, right, sometimes the answer is restriction, right? So yes, we spoke about in last episode and also this episode about the importance of addressing your tikkun, but what if your tikkun is restriction?
Exactly, which we did talk about.
Right. And I think, for instance, especially Rachel, if you've had an experience where you tried to address it, it didn't go well, sometimes restricting and maybe eventually maybe addressing it in a way that is not an effect of being triggered or by an effect of being upset by this happening.
Or even being like, I see this, I know it, it's my job to do it, just to see where ego might be playing a role there. And also for you. And instead get curious about the person that you're noticing this about. How would they best receive this? Maybe you need to make them be aware through exploring how they could be curious about how they could be better. I mean, there's many ways to approach it. I would say you should probably approach it the exact opposite way. And it's not just, okay, saying it straight out versus saying it kindly. Like you said, maybe it's not saying it at all. And then having them, through your leadership, come to the conclusion themselves, right? I think that what it sounds like is really you're being asked to do the opposite of what feels natural.
Right. And I would say, well, I'll only add, I think it's a sign from the creator, the fact that the last time it didn't go well. So there's obviously a learning, right? A different way to approach it this time. And again, often if you embrace it as your restriction, that will bring light and blessings, I'm sure. And following Monica's advice in the way to approach it, you'll see great benefit from it.
And ask the question, why do I need to say this? Why does this even need to be heard? Maybe it doesn't, sure, maybe the person can improve, but do they really need to hear this? Do you really need to say it? I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and her tikkun is this need to control every single thing, in her own words. And, she brought it up with her children, and, she's saying all these things and they're not responding to it, and she's losing control. If you stop trying to control, you just step back a second. Why is it I feel that I need this, right? Because what she's trying to do is getting her the opposite of result of what she wants. Allow them, that space. But it will show up over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. One more email I'd like to share. Dear Michael and Monica, after my last email, I started Kabbalah 1 and now currently doing Kabbalah 2. My life has changed towards the best in ways that I never could have imagined possible. After leaving everything in the hands of the Creator and accepting any outcome that may come because that is how the light designed it for me, I am much more serene and many good things have happened. So it's very much connects to Rachel's email from before, this idea of restriction. Sometimes that's the best way to fix a tikkun or to correct a tikkun. My husband is a completely different person who loves me and expresses it freely as he never had before. Once I understood that my life would be okay with or without him because I will always have the light, he suddenly became the man I always hoped he would be. which I think is really, really significant. We were pregnant again a second time and had a miscarriage in the 6th week. And that only made my faith stronger that when the time is right, our baby will grow. It also made our love stronger and has connected us deeper. I feel I have finally found my people and hope one day I will be able to walk into a center and meet my fellow Kabbalah students, teachers, and mentors in person. So thanks for she shares some of her personal experiences with the study at the center. Thanks for your wisdom and your kindness through your podcast. It is a ray of light in many lives. God bless you and enjoy these special days. Kind regards, Eva from Cyprus.
Nice.
So first of all, now it's nice. I like to have this visual of our friend Eva in Cyprus studying, but also I think this idea, this podcast, not coincidentally, was about restriction. And I think it's a very important lesson that when you understand restriction is not just, certainly not repression, as you mentioned before, Monica, but rather as a way to reveal light. This moment, this situation is pregnant with light. My greatest tool to reveal it is restriction, as Eva experienced. Sometimes the blessings comes right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but without a doubt, the more you become better at pausing, the more you could become greater at restriction, the more quickly and the more great your blessings will be. So thank you, Rachel and Eva, for sharing with us and sharing with all of our listeners and everybody who writes in. Please, we read all of your emails. Please make sure to continue sending your emails, questions, comments, inspiration, stories to Monica and Michael at spirituallyhungry.life. And as always, make sure to write 5-star reviews on Apple, share this podcast with everybody you know. And as always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it.
Stay spiritually hungry.